district and the families that entrust us with this important work. The reason for my absence is that I am undergoing a long-planned routine medical procedure. Timing for such things is never perfect. I know we have a great deal of important business to attend to on behalf of JCPS, but in this case, scheduling must reflect the availability of my doctor and the medical facility where the procedure is taking place. After a brief stay in the hospital, I will return home to recuperate. I anticipate resuming a regular schedule after the holidays. Taking time away from ongoing priorities is always a difficult thing to do, but I know that you will carry on your good work during my absence. Thank you all for your understanding and support, and particularly for your service to JCPS. All the best, David Jones. So Chair Jones is not here tonight. You've got me. That could be good or bad, but thank you for the opportunity, and we are absolutely wishing him the best during this time. Before we do our moment of silence, I want to say that we had 2 work sessions this afternoon. At 4 o'clock, we had a work session on the statewide assessment outcomes and presentation on equity initiatives. At 5:30, we had a work session on comprehensive sexuality education. Last week, the district experienced a horrific accident that involved several of our students at 32nd and Dumanil. During that time, the community came together. The neighbors came together, parents came together, JCPS staff, LMPD, the hospital workers, EMS. So before we go into that moment of silence, there is a lot to be grateful for in life. And sometimes we take life for granted, and we never should. So I'm saying all that to say, as you close your eyes and take this moment of silence, could we be thankful for life and for the people that make life possible? At this time, could we have a moment of silence? Thank you. If we could please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you very much. Board Member Dr. Lisa Wilner will read our vision statement.
All Jefferson County Public School students graduate prepared, empowered, and inspired to reach their full potential and contribute as thoughtful, responsible citizens of our diverse, shared world.
Thank you very much. And at this time, I've asked Board Member Chuck Hadaway to read a motion that pertains to Chair Jones' absence.
I move pursuant to KRS 160.2701 that the board excuse the failure of Board Chairman David Jones Jr. to attend this meeting of the board.
So we have a motion. Is there a second? Mr. Brady seconds. All those in favor? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. And for any meeting that is missed, we will do the same motion. It's important policy-wise in order that we take care of that business. So I thank you for doing that. At this time, I would like to introduce Terry Robinson, who will bring us our recognitions and resolutions. Ms. Robinson, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hardins, Board Vice Chair Diane Porter, and members of the Jefferson County Board of Education. This evening, we begin with the recognition of Cane Run Elementary School, Lincoln Elementary Performing Arts School, and Price Elementary School as National PTA Schools of Excellence, a designation that recognizes schools for their achievements in building strong family and school partnerships, as well as making a positive impact on the success and well-being of students. Board Vice Chair Diane Porter and Assistant Superintendent Joe Leffert, please come forward and congratulate PTA President Ben Cole, Assistant Principal Michael Ice, and Principal Susan French Epps of Lincoln Elementary Performing Arts School. Board Member Chuck Hadaway and Assistant Superintendent Joe Leffert, please congratulate PTA President Adam Kessler and Principal Kim Coslow of Cane Run Elementary School. Board Member Dr. Lisa Wellner and Assistant Superintendent Michelle Diller, please congratulate PTA President Harrison and Principal Siobhan Ray of Price Elementary. Next, we are so proud to recognize the JCPS 2017 Valvoline Teacher Achievement Award recipients: Karen Cook, a teacher at Kenwood Elementary School; Alexandria Howard, a teacher at Barrett Traditional Middle School; and Kip Hotman, a teacher at Fern Creek High School. They were formally recognized by Valvoline Company officials and state leaders on October 19th at the State Capitol Building in Frankfort. Board Vice Chair Porter and Assistant Superintendent Joe Leffert, please congratulate teacher Alexandra Howard. Joining in the recognition is Principal Tom Worthen. Board Member Linda Duncan and Assistant Superintendent Brad Weston, please congratulate teacher Karen Cook. Joining in the recognition is Principal Jill Hanley. Board Member Chris Brady and Assistant Superintendent Michelle Dillard, please congratulate teacher Kip Hotman. Joining in the recognition is Principal Dr. Nathan Meyer. We are extremely proud to next honor Southern High School, Olmsted Academy North, and Seneca High School for being named Best Practice Schools. These schools were recognized for their commitment and outstanding work in providing more creative, effective, and efficient instruction in advancing student learning and achievement. They also serve as role models for their peers across the state in implementing and sharing best practices in supporting student learning and college and career readiness for all students. Board Vice Chair Diane Porter, and Assistant Superintendent Joe Leffert please come forward to congratulate Principal Kim Morales of Seneca High School. Board Member Lyndon Duncan, Assistant Superintendents Brad Weston and Dr. Paige Hartstern, please congratulate Principal Ryan Radowski of Olmsted Academy North and Principal Bryce Hibbert of Southern High School. Finally, we have the honor of recognizing the 15 District PTA Award recipients of the Kentucky PTA Awards. These distinguished honorees exemplify outstanding service, leadership, and commitment to our local school PTAs and to JCPS students. I'd like to ask Heather Wampler, 15 District PTA President, and Sherry Dymar, State President, to please first join Vice Chair Diane Porter, Assistant Superintendents Joe Leffert and Brad Weston, please come forward and congratulate the PTA Award recipients in District 1. PTA President Ben Kolb, Cynthia Chanel, Assistant Principal Michael Ice, Principal Susan French Epps, Lincoln Performing Arts School, PTA President Betsy Johnson, and Principal Chris Berber, Mazik Middle School, PTSA President Andrea Goins, and Principal Raymond Green, Central High School Magnet Career Academy, PTSA President Robin Weiss, Pinky Jackson, former PTA President and Outstanding Volunteer Award recipient, April Moore, Outstanding Educator Award, and Principal Jerry Mays, DuPont Manual High School. Board Vice Chair Diane Porter, Assistant Superintendents Dr. Paige Hartstern, Michelle Dillard, and Joe Leffert, please come forward and congratulate the award recipients in District 2. PTA President Penny Lentz, Lakita Clay, Principal at Chenoweth Elementary School, Principal Jessica Rosenthal, Hawthorne Elementary, and Principal Tom Wortham, Barrett Traditional Middle School. Board Member Stephanie Horn and Assistant Superintendent Joe Leffert, please congratulate the award recipients in District 3, Vice President Allison Martin and Principal Tracy Barber at Dunn Elementary School. Board Member Chuck Hadaway and Assistant Superintendents Glenn Beatty and Brad Weston, please congratulate the award recipients in District 4, PTA President Lynn Kaysen and
Principal Stephen Howard, Dixie Elementary School. PTSA President Melanie Geitzer from Doss High School. Board Member Linda Duncan and Assistant Superintendents Brad Weston and Dr. Paige Hartshorn, please congratulate the award recipients in District 5. Principal Jill Hanley, Kenwood Elementary School, and Principal Michelle Yates, Logoff Elementary School. Board Member Chris Brady and Assistant Superintendent Glenn Beatty, please congratulate the award recipient in District 7, PTA President Kara Joint, and Principal Dr. Bridget Owen, Stouffer Elementary School. Dr. Harkins and members of the Jefferson County Board of Education, this concludes our recognitions for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson. And we have a lot of people that we've recognized tonight, and I know we can do a better job with applause. So let's give them a huge round of applause. Is there a motion to receive the recognitions? Mr. Hadaway, second. Mr. Brady, all those in favor? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Normally, we would dismiss students to go home and do homework, so I will just say you are dismissed. You can decide what you'd like to do after you leave this auditorium. Thank you so much for being here. Before we move on with the agenda, this afternoon in our work session, we had an opportunity to hear about expectations, and I wanted to take just a moment to not necessarily get off the agenda, but to talk about the importance of our work as a school board. And one of the things that I've done is I looked up a saying that talks about what we do about teamwork. And it says that teamwork is the ability to work together toward a common vision, the ability to direct individual accomplishments toward organizational objectives. It is the fuel that allows people to attain amazing results. And that came from Andrew Carnegie. Board members, each one of us bring valuable skills and talents to this board. As we move forward with our work, our primary consideration in any board decision should be tangible impact it will have on students in our district. When board teams understand the facts and relevant data and keep the needs of all students in mind when making decisions, we will make good decisions. So I know you're like, well, what is she going to do sitting up there as the vice chair? So my responsibility at this time is to preside over the meetings of the board in the absence of the chair, keep the discussion focused on the topic under consideration, encourage each member to contribute, and give attention to all questions. So I just want to be clear on the expectations. If I fail, let me know. But every time that I'm here, I will be trying to do the work of the board in an organized, formal fashion, professionally, to take care of the work that we must do. Before we approve the agenda, we are going to take W off the agenda. That is going to be taken off. And we're also going to have a motion before we approve the agenda, but I want to talk a little bit before we do the motion. Typically, this board has been working as the superintendent's evaluation. We have something that's called the formative evaluation, where we go into session and talk about the work that the superintendent has done since we issued the evaluation to her in June. We have not done that this year. Board Member Duncan has asked for it a couple of times. We did discuss it. We felt that because we were having an election and perhaps a change of membership, that we would wait until January, but there is a desire to have that session this evening where we talk with the superintendent about the work that she has done since we issued the evaluation. During that meeting, all board members will be there and our general counsel will be in the room as well. So in order to do that, we're going to ask for an executive session that will be held at the end of the board meeting in respecting everyone that's here and the presentations that we will hear this evening. So Board Member Horn will make that motion now for an executive session, and I want to say again that it will be held at the end of the meeting in the normal agenda pattern. So Board Member Horn.
I move that the board conduct an executive session for the purpose of conducting a discussion on the 2016-17 evaluation of the superintendent by the board as permitted by KRS 61.811K and KRS 156.566C.
Is there a second? Ms. Duncan, all those in favor? Unanimously. So as we move on with the meeting agenda will include an executive session, so it's not a surprise to anybody while you're sitting there saying, are they going to have an executive session? We will have an executive session this evening. Is there a motion to approve the agenda? Mr. Hadaway, seconded by Dr. Wilner. All those in favor? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Moving on to the minutes of the previous meeting, September 27th meeting. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of the September 27th regular meeting? Motion to approve, Ms. Duncan, second, Mr. Brady. All those in favor? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you so much. Moving on to Dr. Hargens and the superintendent's report. Dr. Hargens.
Thank you, Vice Chair Porter, members of the board, and the opportunity to present the superintendent's report. So I want to thank Dr. Dossett, the principals, Marty Polio, Kim Rice, and Michael Terry, Dr. Marshall, and Dr. Herring for reviewing 2016 accountability outcomes, successes, opportunities for improvement, and the support structure designed to keep our academic climb going. Graduation, let's just review. This is college and career readiness that shows the increase. Graduation rate, we broke 80%. This is our achievement in gap. This is a summary of how our subgroups have done from 2012 to 2016 and last year. And then this is all of our subgroups and how they've done. So we know that we're moving in the right direction, but we're not nearly where we need to be, and we all stand committed to ensuring that every JCPS student graduates prepared. We also had a work session about standards. Students should have equal access to every Kentucky standard through support for consistent standards-based instruction. Teachers, community partners, and curriculum and instruction staff have been engaging in designing a curriculum map around the standard that deals with responsible sexual behavior. That will include aligned resources and required training for our health teachers. This will reduce the variability and inconsistency that is happening now, thanks to Suzanne Wright and Donna Benton and the JCPS health teachers for their collaboration with our community partners. That is Vision 2020 in action. The Cradle to Career pipeline must have insulation to support our students. Louisville Linked is a system that links supports with student needs and provides the insulation of support around the academic pipeline. In the latest report, 26,111 links were made through the second pupil month of this school year, serving 153 school sites and 9,163 students. So this is Vision 2020 in action. And as promised, I'm bringing you a 90-day report on the JCPS call center known as 313 Help. It operates from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. and is staffed by a team of 6. This chart shows the daily call volume and weekly call volume. The types of calls at the beginning of the year, the types of calls that were leading were transportation and student assignment related. And now most of the calls are connect me to somebody, followed by I want to be connected with human resources or to an area superintendent. This is calls by month and calls by day. And this is total calls per week by representative, by a member of the team. This shows an average day in the call center. And of course, there are next steps to continuously improve this service. The board has asked me to report at every meeting where we are in terms of 3 critical metrics: attendance, staffing, and discipline. So we are able to, and the board is able to monitor these metrics daily. So you can tell that attendance is about the same, and you can also tell that there are more unexcused absences. The middle one is staff attendance, and you can see by the middle chart that we are about the same with staff attendance than we were last time this year. And we've filled 6,652 positions. And through the school year, you can see discipline referrals are up. And we believe that that's partly due to our adherence to and absolute adherence to making sure that everything is reported accurately in Infinite Campus. For example, all bus referrals are entered in Infinite Campus now. They were not at the beginning of last school year. So here is a slide show really that shows these different things broken down. So this is student average daily attendance rates. The next one is staff average daily attendance rates. And this is behavior occurrences. So all types of behavior, and again, everything is being entered into the same database into Infinite Campus. So back to the data dashboard, again, the key metrics are staff attendance, student attendance, and total behavioral incidents. So I wanted to make sure that I drill deeper, even though the dashboard isn't ready to do that. I actually get a report every week about how many vacancies we have, and here's a chart that talks about that. So you can see the number of resignations and retirements we've had and transfers. We have had new positions that were added because of the number of students we have. We have 10 vacant positions that have been vacant all year, and we're working on filling. So you can see a total of 67.5 vacancies, certified vacancies. Before I go to coherence, I just wanted to note something on the agenda. We have a contract for the Teacherpreneur program. Paul Barnwell is our Teacherpreneur. So on the agenda tonight is approval of a contract with the Center for Teacher Quality to support the JCPS Voice Initiative. The Teacherpreneur is a specially created position who spends half of his time in the classroom and half time building infrastructure for JCPS Voice, a teacher-led online professional learning network. With support from the Center for Teacher Quality, in 2015-16, last year, JCPS Voice created a pilot initiative wherein 10 teachers were trained to lead online virtual learning communities, or VLCs, creating professional learning opportunities for teachers to interact within and across grade level schools and content areas. This project includes anytime, anywhere learning opportunities, webinars, discussion forums, and interactions with national experts. Offerings have included VLCs in writing instruction, project-based learning, middle school math, serving students with learning differences, and STEAM labs. Thus far, JCPS Voice has engaged 110 JCPS participants in this online learning opportunity, with a goal of reaching 500 participants by the end of this school year. Expansion will continue for 16-17 and beyond, and JCPS Voice has begun offering professional development credit to teachers, which is expected to increase teacher participation. At our last meeting, Dr. Dossett reported that 14 out of our 134 A1 schools fall outside of the diversity index. The question is, short term, how do we support these schools? And long term, how can we develop strategies to get these schools within the board-approved diversity index? We have started, and that's the slide up there, a coherence written by Michael Fullen book study group. Our first meeting was on October 12th from 5 to 7. Members of the group, Dr. Dossett, Brent McKim, Dr. Herring, Tom Hudson, Dr. Powers, myself, Alan Young, Paige Hartstern, Dr. Hartstern, and Bryce Hibbert. Board members all received a copy of this book, and Bryce Hibbert is doing a book study at Southern, and Paige Hartstern is doing a book study on coherence in her area, and Dr. Herring said she's doing a book study with the academic learning team as well. So we actually watched the Patrick Dolan dinner work session video and had a discussion about the implications for this work and next steps. Members of the group will attend the Quest conference, where Fullen will be presenting in November. Important to note that the JCPS Showcase of Schools will be held this Friday, October 28th, from 3 to 7, and Saturday, October 29th, from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. And remember, the location is at the Kentucky Exposition Center this year. Again, Friday evening, Saturday, our Showcase of Schools. So Vice Chair Porter, I'm recommending for approval the consent agenda, which will come later in your agenda.
Thank you, Dr. Harkins. Moving on to, I'm sorry, Dr. Wilner.
I just wanted to ask Dr. Harkins a question about the report. First of all, I really appreciate the data focus of the report, so thank you for that. And it looks like the three big things that you pulled out, the student attendance, staff attendance, those are both holding pretty solid.
That's right.
What would you like for us to understand about the big increase in behavior incidents?
And again, I believe it's due, and we have a review team that is looking at all the incidences. So that's part of our new behavior support and intervention system, is that it's constantly reviewed by a group of stakeholders, both in-house and external stakeholders. So we believe preliminarily that it is, because everything is being entered into this single database, that the number of referrals that you see is going up. So I think that's partially the reason. The other thing is we consider that actually not to be a negative but a positive. What that says in our review is that teachers and principals are working to intervene early to help students learn to make better choices. So intervening early is not a bad thing. So again, but we'll be monitoring that. I will bring this same dashboard back to you every meeting so you can see where we are at every meeting.
Thank you.
Ms. Horn and then Ms. Brady.
We had a really great work session earlier where we looked at some of the more longer term, metrics, and we talked about the gap. And I wondered if you could tell us a little bit. I know the U.S. Secretary of Education is looking at Kentucky, and saying that Kentucky needs to address the academic achievement gap separating Black and white students. And it said that in the last 4 years in Jefferson County, the gap in reading and math achievement between Black and white students has widened. So that has been, in the last 4 years, it is widening. And so I think this isn't like a partisan issue at all. I think it's just an issue that affects our children greatly. And I'm just trying to understand, we see that everything is going, like you just presented, in the right direction. But how can that be in the right direction? How can we rationalize that everything is going in the right direction when we have this gap widening between Black students and white students?
And Dr. Dossett in that chart indicates the gap that exists. So Dr. Dossett really actually spoke to that. When you look at the rate of improvement of all the groups, in order to close the gap, you have to accelerate the improvement of the student group that you're trying to catch up to the other group. And as was indicated by Dr. Marshall, we want every student to be proficient. We want every student to grow academically. So we want every group to be growing, but we have to continue our efforts to make sure that we accelerate the group with the lowest performance to catch the group with the higher performance. So if you increase at the same rate, the gap stays the same, right? If all groups increase at the same rate, the gap stays the same. So we know that we have to accelerate a group of students to be able to catch.
I'm just really concerned that we're not differentiating between students. We're giving resources to schools, and there are a lot of students that actually need this assistance. I'm really hopeful that we can work on this.
Mr. Brady.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I'd like to ask Dr. Wilner's question, but in regards to attendance. I noticed that when we're looking at the data dashboard that the average daily attendance really is pretty much equal and level. But when you look at the total unexcused absences year to date, we're looking at an increase of about 25,000 additional absences. I was curious to know as to, one, what the reason of that is, and two, I would expect that things would be not exactly the same with an additional 25,000 year to date, but or should I not expect that?
And I don't know if Dr. Dossett, you can speak to that part of the dashboard.
We can take a closer look and get back with you on a more detailed answer. One of the contributing factors might be including out-of-school suspensions and unexcused absences that might contribute to that rise. So we'll take a deeper dive and look and see. A lot of times what we find is that you can have an average attendance rate of 95%, and yet we're still seeing numbers of chronically absent students. So that's something that actually we have a pilot program with 7 of our elementary schools with Attendance Works to kind of dig into that level of detail and look at whether just average daily attendance or attendance rate is masking other factors such as habitual truants or chronically absent students. So,
Okay, I just wanted to see how, because that seems to be a pretty massive influx, and I would expect that to affect the average daily attendance. So that's one I'm trying to figure out. Or do we have a definition issue where somehow average daily attendance doesn't take into account somehow kids that are suspended? Or so I'm just trying to figure out how to reconcile that difference. And also, if there is if we know a particular reason as to why there appears to be an uptick, at least in the unexcused absences, if we've actually done some data analysis to find out, is this something that's new? Is this something that should be expected? I'm just trying to figure out how we can figure out what the trend is and how to address it.
right. I think that those are all really good questions. And one of the strategies that we had when rolling out the dashboard is to be able to come back and have longer, in-depth conversations about each of these indicators and kind of the driving factors and contributing factors to take a deeper dive and look to see what patterns and trends we're seeing and what kind of action we're taking as a district to see the change in that trajectory. So that's something when we come back and talk about the discipline and school climate factors, we'll be taking a look at that behavior side of the dashboard, and we can do the same thing when we talk about attendance as well.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Duncan, and then we're going to move on with the agenda. But Ms. Duncan?
Just one thing. Is there a way that we can also get a picture into our minority hiring so we can kind of see how we're doing on that? I mean, we've got the vacancies covered, and just that one other thing, could we add that one other piece to see how we're doing on minority hiring?
That part of the dashboard is being developed, the staffing part, so we'll see if we can add that or bring you back information regarding that. That's an important part of Vision 2020, so that's a good question.
Right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Hargens, for your report. Before we go on, there is someone that has signed up to speak on a consent item, and I think the item has been pulled. So I want to say that because I don't want someone to sit here and then be annoyed with us. Item W on the consent calendar, which is revision of board policies, 3.11 hiring certified and 3.21 hiring classified. The first reading of that has been pulled. Am I correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so I think we have a speaker to that, and I don't want to, I value your time, so I appreciate you being here, but I don't want you to be annoyed when we won't have a speaker because that's no longer on the agenda. Thank you.
Vice Chair, can we I'd like to make a motion to, since this person showed up to discuss this issue, and I know it's a consent item that's no longer been on, that's no longer in a consent calendar, but since this person didn't know that prior to coming here, and they spent their time coming here and spending their, taking the time and effort to come here.
I didn't know it before I came here.
Yeah, so yes, me either. So can we go ahead and adjust the, I'd like to make a motion to let this individual speak to this particular item, since when they came here, it was on the consent calendar, and they made the time and effort to address this board.
I will defer to General Counsel because I don't want to set up a precedence for something that we will have to live with from this point on.
Which is why I would make a motion for that.
Would you please respond?
The agenda's already been approved, so I take it that Board Member Brady's motion is to revisit that topic and to revise the agenda and approve it as revised?
No, it is not. Well, I guess it is. My topic would be to keep the existing process for allowing folks to talk to or to address us regarding a consent calendar item, but prior to or after I had already approved the agenda calendar or the agenda for this meeting, then I just now found out that there's a speaker that's going to address it. Had I known that prior to that, I would have made my motion before I had voted to approve the calendar. So I think it's incumbent upon us to, if someone takes the time and effort to address this board, and they get here only to find out that just then that we're withdrawing an item, then we should honor their commitment to time to address us.
Understood. I think a motion to, in effect, amend the agenda is an appropriate motion, and it's been made, so if there's a second and a vote, it would be appropriate.
So are we amending the agenda to put W back on? Because W is off of the agenda. I'm confused.
No, it's not to.
Amending the agenda to allow the speaker to speak out of turn, in effect.
That is correct.
So Mr. Brady has made a motion. Is there a second? Ms. Wilner, Dr. Wilner, all those in favor, and what, want to restate, would you restate your motion?
The motion is to allow this speaker to speak, not to have to wait until the end of the meeting to address the school board, since this person was going to address us regarding this consent calendar item. So my motion is to allow this person to address the board now regarding this one item, and that's it.
So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor? All those opposed? Ms. Duncan, where are we? Opposed?
Abstain.
I'm sorry?
Abstain.
Abstain. Okay, so we have 5. Can I count? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4, and 1 abstention. Thank you. And I wasn't suggesting that the speaker would have to wait until the end. I was trying to give her the benefit of the doubt to know that it was no longer on the agenda.
Yeah, sure.
And at that point, she had the option of leaving if she chose to do so. And when we approved the agenda, and I said that W was off, I'm not sure that the speaker understood that the item that she was speaking for was W. So I'm trying to be respectful of everybody's time as we move forward. Having said that, we will move forward with the agenda. Thank you, everyone. We have done the superintendent's report. There are no action items, information items. There are no speakers on this item. So our information item is to improve communications for public school choice. At this point, Dr. Hargens, would you like to introduce?
Yes, Dr. Dossett is going to present this item, Vision 2020. Part of Vision 2020 is ensuring that all families, all students have access to public school choice. So Dr. Dossett is going to update us on where we are in that portion of Vision 2020.
Thank you. Good evening. We appreciate the opportunity to talk about access to public school choice and our strategies for improving communication. It feels like we just got started with the 16-17 school year, and already we're turning our attention to the 17-18 school year. But it's never too early, I think, to communicate to our families that the application period begins soon. I know Dr. Hargens made mention of the Showcase of Schools, which is this weekend. And so a lot of the strategies that we'll be talking about tonight are efforts to improve our communication process and some internal processes so that we improve the access to choice among our families. So we're going to spend most of our time talking about 3 key leverage strategies: improving communications, empowering families, and improving processes. And so I want to begin by recognizing the great collaboration and teamwork that it takes with our IT department, with our communications department, with our academic services department. It really takes a village to make sure that we have choices that meet the needs for all of our students, and that families and parents are aware of that. So with that, I'm going to just briefly touch on a few of our targeted outreach initiatives that we had this year. We worked closely with communications department to make sure that we engaged in targeting advertising for those areas of our district that don't always engage in choice within our time period. So we had a targeted effort and outreach to those zip codes that tend to be late applications. We also are providing more information in multiple languages, and we're collaborating with our Kindergarten Action Network, which includes working with Metro United Way, the Health Department, the 4 Cs, different community organizations, to make sure that as they're working with their families that everybody is aware of the type of choices that are available. So we do have our TV and radio spots in 5 different languages. We worked with the different, and our communications office worked with the different community agencies to make sure that this information was shared out with community organizations through their social networks and social media campaigns as well. So we've also revised our choices booklet or book. We've changed it from a book to a brochure. We've redesigned it so that it's based on program themes, and so that we're consistent in our language of how we describe programs, and that hopefully families then can choose the program that best meets their child's needs rather than choosing by school. They might be able to look and see, I'm interested in visual performing arts, or I'm interested in math and science and technology. And so the descriptions that we have for each of those programs then are consistent across the schools. It's also easier to translate and reproduce, and so we will be, we're currently working on translating the brochures into multiple languages as well. Our future improvements include creating individualized and personalized videos for each school so that families can view that at any time. I know our Showcase of Schools, we have lots of visitors that engage in that opportunity, but really I think one of the most powerful pieces is being able to go into school and get a sense of the culture and the environment, and when you can't do walkthroughs, videos might be the next best thing in that, and getting a sense of that feeling of family within schools. So I know a lot of times when we're doing, for example, Leadership Louisville, and we bring the community into our schools, there's a lot of aha moments of, oh, it's so nice to be in the school. I didn't know this, or I didn't know that. And so those are the types of experiences that we want to provide to our families through these videos. We're also going to be surveying our families who applied but didn't end up choosing or enrolling in JCPS. We want to get a sense for what were any potential barriers. Was there logistics, communication, issues with placement that preventing them from sending their child to JCPS. So we'll be reaching out to those families to see how we can improve our outreach efforts in that regard. And then moving on to empowering families, we have been working very closely with our IT department, and we've been talking about this actually a couple of times. We've talked about this at different work sessions, but we're now at a point where we are rolling out a predictability tool for our elementary cluster choices this year. We have been piloting it in our application center and our registration center at the Land Building, getting parent feedback about what they like about it, what makes sense, what's easy for them to understand about it, what's confusing. And so basically what this allows parents to do is to engage in their choice options and see their likelihood of being placed at that school depending on certain characteristics. So it's a 7-step process where families enter information about their address, when they're going to be submitting an application. So if families know, a lot of times we have families that move into the district during the summer for job opportunities or other circumstances, and so they miss out on the application period. What this will allow them to do is say, okay, I know I'm going to be moving into Jefferson County in the summer, so what are my likelihood of getting into these schools during that time period? Whether they have siblings, their grade levels, so they enter that basic information in the system, and then it lets you know kind of on a 5-point Likert scale from not likely to very likely, your chances of getting into to that school, that applicants from similar circumstances with a first choice were assigned there. So this is something that you can actually, a parent or a family can go back and say, well, let me change my first choice from this school to that school, or let me see what happens if I apply on time versus not on time. And so a lot of times we hear a conversation about, the idea that parents or families feel like they may waste their choice. And so what we're trying to do is give them more information that they can use. And it took a few years of data in our new cluster configuration to have the analytics by which to do that. So it's hopefully a pretty simple and easy process that our families can get and engage in. If you, off of our main website, if you go to apply, register and apply, new student, it's one of the, it's on the left-hand side on the resource tab. So I click on register and apply, and there it is, 2 clicks away from the home page. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Barbara to talk a little bit about our improved processes for our magnet applications and in terms of hopefully benefits and advantages that both our families will see and schools will see as well.
So when the Magnet Schools of America was here a couple years ago, they looked at our processes and made some recommendations, and one of the recommendations they made was they said, why do parents have to collect academic records from current students and transport them to another school? So we started investigating that, and again, thanks to our partners in the IT department, they managed to help us out and find a solution to that issue. So when parents are going to see the application, which becomes available on Monday, parents of current students will see the question that says, I give permission for my child's information to be provided to the school for which I apply. And that's all they have to do. So they don't have to run and get their counselor to make copies of their records. They don't have to go track down those other things. And when that's done, it does become a step toward more equitable access and eliminating barriers for families. I think you've had the discussion, we've had the discussion that if you work from 7:30 in the morning until 4 o'clock in the afternoon, it's not always possible to get to a school, pick up records, transport them to another school during school hours. It also, sometimes that extra step might be a barrier parents aren't aware of. And so we thought this would be a great way just to eliminate that, that step for them. So we also think that this process will assist schools. They will reduce the volume of paperwork they have to track. It will assist schools in easily tracking the reports that we have available to schools, can help them see who still needs information now. Non-JCPS students do not have this luxury at this time because we don't have access to their information, but for our current students, it will help them. In addition, we already talked about that current guidance counselors will not need to copy information and provide it to schools. When we presented this information to guidance counselors, they were very excited and made a couple of recommendations for us to consider, which IT has already accommodated, and one is a transition tool for 5th and 8th grade counselors so that they can see which of their students have completed the application and help them collect any additional information that may be required. So that was a fairly quick turnaround in getting that response, and the counselors, again, are very appreciative of that. When a school starts to look at applications, they will be able to see a report very similar to that. I know that's very small, but it's a really long report. And schools can use that data and sort it in a way that makes sense for them and help them track applications, which right now, many schools have their own systems, but we're hoping that by using their feedback, we'll be able to develop a system that's useful, more useful for everyone. This is not the end of the road for us. Every year we ask our colleagues in IT to make improvements that will assist schools, that will assist parents. We hope that in the future we would like the ability to upload information. There are still some things that schools ask for, work samples, essays, some interest inventories, recommendations, and so we would like the ability for people to get those uploaded. So again, to help eliminate that need for paper. We'd like to, in the future, develop the ability for a parent to be able to track the application, to go back in there and see and say, oh, I didn't get that reference in there, or say to their child, let's look and see, it looks like you're still missing your essay, let's try to get this in here because I want to see that box checked off. And on down the road, we'd like to be able to notify parents electronically of the status of their application. Were they accepted into a program? Were they not accepted into a program? So those are on the horizon for the next couple of years. I met with the IT people again this morning, and we talked about what would be a reasonable timeline to implement those kinds of things with fidelity. And we'll be happy to answer any questions.
Before we open up to questions, Dr. Dawson, would you introduce everyone that's before us tonight so we can know who to thank?
Yes, this is Raghus Sardri, who is the director of the IT department, and Josh Franey, who's helped on a number of things. One is the application process, that when you log in to register and apply, he worked on that front, as well as the predictability tool of what parents interact with that experience.
Would you tell us what Ms. Dixie does?
Oh, and Barbara Dempsey is our director of student assignment, and so she does a number of things, but working on making experiences better for families. I mean, that's what our overarching goal with is, and improving access to choice. So that's our main focus.
Okay, thank you. Questions? I think, Ms. Duncan, you had your hand raised.
Yes, Barbara, I just wanted to ask you, one of the things that was troubling to me is that sometimes our schools had that ability, if you didn't mark them first, they would not be considered. I mean, if you wanted them second, they wouldn't accept you because you didn't mark them first.
Right.
Is there some way that we have fixed this so this doesn't happen to people?
That is one of the improvements we want to work on. Our current system, we process requests sequentially. So we process your first choice first and your second choice second. We are beginning the process of figuring out how to have true second choices for applications, similar to applying for a college. You can apply for Western Kentucky University, you can apply for the University of Louisville. Both schools could have equal access to your child's information, but that will take some reconfiguring of our systems. In addition, we will need to figure out some supports for schools so that they can manage a larger volume of applications. Potentially, schools could get twice as many applications to look at. So we want to help schools. We want to have the back-end support for schools, as well as have all the systems in place before we're able to do that. But we certainly have started the steps in making that happen.
Very good. Thank you.
And if I can add to that, we've also identified certain programs that do fall in that category of, if you put it as a second choice, you're unlikely maybe to get that assignment. And we're warning them on the magnet application about that. So if you apply for a program as a second choice and you're unlikely to get that choice, it will tell you.
Okay, very good.
Ms. Horn and then Mr. Brady.
Since most people move, like real estate, people move in the spring and in the summer. And so that puts you, outside of the window for the applying for schools. And so I'm concerned a little bit, like the predictability tool in my area and potentially in Chris's area, there's going to be, it's going to be a little scary to see, because you might be very unlikely to get your choice. So it could be what do people do if they use this predictability tool and they get such a low percent likelihood of getting their schools? It could really be scary to parents. And so how will we be working through that issue? Because I would expect that to happen. Do you know what I mean?
Right. No, that's a really good point, and I think that's something that we're going to have to watch and monitor closely. Part of what we can do through the registration center is have those conversations with parents to say, kind of like a think aloud as you fill out this application. What do these choices mean for you? The other strategy that we need to engage in is letting parents know that there is opportunities to re-engage in the system through, so if you don't get your first choice, you could still apply for a transfer, and that transfer appeal process has multiple steps, and so that we do everything that we can during the summer to, as a spot opens up, to place parents there as we have space. So that's something that we'll make sure that we engage in families and let them know that there's other ways to
So it's
get
almost
into
like
the
a
system.
predictability tool for the transfer process then.
Right, we can, I mean, I think this is our pilot with our elementary cluster programs. I think we can look to expanding this predictability tool with our magnet programs, with our transfer process, so that we're just really very transparent to families and what their decisions mean for their students.
So one more thing, Ms. Horn. Right now, we find a lot of families fear the worst when, so at least now we have some information to share with them. Because what we hear often from families is, I'll never get what I want. And when we look at the data, that may not be a quite accurate picture, and we can talk with them about their options. So we hope that actually having good information and not relying on urban legends, which are sometimes inaccurate, may actually be reassuring to parents rather than frightening. That's our hope.
That there's something set up when we do this, so that, because right now, I kind of take a lot of calls,
Right.
and then I filter them through, and so that could be a lot more. So if there's a process in place,
And we
that's
can
right there.
Right, we can look at our language on that screen and make sure they know to call us when they have
What
questions.
we do, and I'm happy to help people work through it, working closely
Right.
with your department.
Mr. Brady.
So, as a parent of a fifth grader, it's about to go into middle school, are you sure you can't open up this pilot for middle schools?
They're very smart. You need to ask.
Well,
the
they
IT
have a lot on
folks.
their plate as it is. I want to say thank you for this. This is something that is obviously addressed in the third one, in section 3 of our strategic plan in Vision 2020. I know that Member Horn and I co-chaired that work group, to kind of the technology performance work group that you guys were an integral part of. And this is one of the initiatives that was brought forward that's in the strategy, and I really like the fact that we're really moving forward on it, and we're going to be piloting this. It's really exciting. More to your point a little bit earlier, parents are still in many ways operating in the dark on some of these things, so this is a nice way of being able to provide some of that information to be able to get around those urban legends
Right.
or myths or whatnot, and to adjust and more accurately reflect the reality versus the perception. I do want to ask a question regarding, and kind of the same question as that was asked about magnet schools, but in relation to the traditional schools. I know very often that there is a certain pathway. If you start on a traditional elementary, you can go kind of feed into the middle traditional program, and then on into the high school program. I understand that process. I understand once you're in it, you're kind of on that pathway. I'm not trying to upset the apple cart on that, but I do get from time to time. I'm sure like Member Horn and the rest of us will get calls that will ask us, well, hey, we'd like to get into the traditional program at the middle school level or even at the high school level. And very often there might be only a very few or limited openings because of that pathway that already exists. Eventually, will this type of predictability tool be able to address those particular issues? Is that one of the things that we're looking at doing here?
Yeah, I think when we get to a point where we can move this predictability tool over for magnet programs, and traditional schools are part of those magnet programs, that we'll have the analytics to be able to say, okay, if you're new to JCPS or not necessarily new to JCPS, but new to the traditional program, what are my chances of getting into a traditional school or any magnet school? So I think it would work the same way once we get to the magnet piece of it.
Okay, because I know very often that's a question we get, and it's really kind of even more nebulistic than some of the other stuff.
Right.
The final thought I have on this, and I certainly don't want to speak for any other board member, but I do want to mention that Chairman Jones has been really a proponent of this initiative, and I think it'd be remiss without recognizing the fact that he's really tried to push for this. And again, I don't want to speak on his behalf, but my sense of Chairman Jones is that he would be appreciative of your efforts in here as well. So, thank you.
Dr. Wilner.
I'll keep mine brief, but I just want to thank you for this. The focus on removing barriers is so important, and English language learners is our fastest growing student population, and so the deftness with which you'll be able to have this translated into more languages, the ability for parents, families to see inside schools without actually having to go to the school. I just on behalf of the folks I represent, I just really want to thank you for that.
Ms. Duncan, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, there was one other thing that I wanted to ask about, and you know, a lot of times it's helpful if you know how many seats are available. Just like when people apply for manual and they want to know how many seats are available under the different programs. Is there any plan or any way that you can communicate how many seats would be available at a grade level so that people could, you know, sort of have an idea? Because I think that also helps give them a picture of whether, you know, which program might be better for them to try and apply for.
I think that's something that we can look at, especially when we get into the magnet predictability tool. Space is something that actually comes into play when you click on whether you're applying during the application window or after, because we know that as seats fill up, then you're less likely to get your first choice. So we can bring that back to the team that's working on it. We wanted to keep it simple and easy for families to use, and so that's why we started with a pretty basic framework of, if you give us this 5 or 6 pieces of information, we can provide you with a degree of likelihood, but that's something that we can bring back to the team to explore further in terms of what information would be helpful to parents, what additional information would be helpful to parents.
All right, thank you.
I have a quick comment about accessibility. It's not so much about what you presented. Thank you for the information that's been presented, but because we've moved the showcase, and I think we've said that multiple times so everyone knows that we are not downtown this year. We're at the Kentucky Fair and Exposition Center. There's at least an $8 parking fee for families to get into that particular facility. And if we are getting a waiver for that, I would like to hear about that. But also, I know some of the churches are bringing groups of parents to the Fair and Exposition Center. It's really important as we talk about what we have improved here, the access to getting to the Fair and Exposition Center. And we strategically have held it downtown. It's not our fault that we're not down there right now for the next 2 years. But I think Ms. Martin has picked up her microphone. So if you could speak to what we're doing to make it more accessible for our families to get to the Fair and Exposition Center, I would appreciate it, please.
Absolutely, Ms. Porter, and I know that's a conversation that we've had several times over the past few months. And I appreciate when we had our previous work session, the board had made sure that we thought about that as we move forward with the Showcase of Schools. So if you go on our website now and you click on the Showcase of Schools, we have a TARC finder there so that you can actually go on and click and find a TARC route that is available there to the fairgrounds. We did ask for a waiver, but there are 2 or 3 other events going on at the fairgrounds that weekend, and we were told they would not be able to waive us and figure out who's going into the different events. That's unfortunate, but we did try. Also, through Dr. Marshall's office, we do have several churches that are providing transportation. They've been communicating with the community and their congregation members, but also different community organizations to let folks know those are available. We did in our ad in the Defender let people know to check with the local churches about what transportation options would be available. And Dr. Marshall's office is also providing transportation from the homeless shelters in the area, picking up families there and taking them to the fairgrounds so that families won't have to worry about accessibility and transportation. And as Dr. Dossett mentioned, one of the things we're working on is the videos as well will be, I think, great for families who work on a Friday night or work on a Saturday, or, you know, grandma's watching the kids on Saturday. She can't go down and take a look either. So I think that'll be a really nice opportunity, and we actually are already in the works on producing those, and hopefully we'll have those all ready to go for next year's application process. But I appreciate you bringing that up, and we do have a lot of options for families. But again, we wish we were downtown, but with the renovations at the convention center, that's just not possible.
After the showcase this year, is there a way to survey our schools to determine if there are families that would be willing to come to the schools, if we could provide buses from local school locations to the fairgrounds? I know that we're close into the event this year, but would it be possible to gather that information to see if that's a feasibility? Because to not see the showcase, we are taking away an opportunity for conversation for multiple schools during that time. So thank you for all that you all have done. You've done a tremendous amount of work to making sure that people get there, because it's not, you can get there on TARC, but it's
a long ride.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a transfer process. So thank you for everything that you've done up to this point.
And we will be surveying the principals after the showcase this year, and that's a future discussion of what does showcase look like in the future? How do we modernize it? How do we continue it? And I do know we did speak with some schools that had offered buses last year. Thank you, Tom. Atkinson in particular. And they did not have any families utilize that transportation, and Atkinson had paid for that out of its own school funds. So some schools were hesitant to do that this year when they knew it hadn't been utilized last year. But we will absolutely be surveying the principals and the staff there at the schools about what can we do to modernize it and what can we do to make it more accessible.
And there's a survey that parents complete when they come out of the showcase, so maybe,
Yes.
I mean, they've already been printed, but if there's a possibility of putting the question on there saying, could the district provide transportation from your local school, just to get a feel for that, to see how many people would check, so that may give us another way of looking at it.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other questions from the board? Hearing none, is there a motion to receive the presentation for improving communications for public school choice? Mr. Brady, second. Mr. Hadaway, all those in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you very much to the team for the presentation and for all the hard work that you have done. Thank you. So we are now going to move to the consent calendar, and I would ask our Ms. Anitra Allen if you would come forth at this time for your presentation. Each speaker has 3 minutes to address the board. At the end of 2.5 minutes, the bell will sound once. You will then have 30 seconds to finish your statement, and at the end of 3 minutes, the bell will sound twice, indicating your time is up. Thank you for being here tonight, and I didn't mean to confuse you. I just wanted to make sure that you were clear on what we were doing, and thank you, Mr. Brady, and to the board for allowing you to speak at this time. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you. Dr. Hargens, the Vice Chair Porter, and the esteemed members of the board. I wanted to thank you, Vice Chair Porter, as well as Member Brady, for making every effort to ensure that my time here was valued. I am a resident of District 7. You may have just secured my vote. And my children, have also attended school in District 1, first at Coleridge Taylor Elementary and now at No Middle School. I have been a PTSA president, SBEM member, a GCBE fellow, had a child with an ISP, 2 children in the primary talent pool, and now 1 in the GT program at No Middle School. So I come to you as someone who is invested in JCPS and invested in making sure that my children get the most that they can out of the experience that they have in JCPS. Prior to the removal of item W, I was hoping that we would be able to get some clarification, and when it is presented back, I would like clarification on the following regarding this particular issue. Number one, it's become generally accepted from the community that is discussing this potential proposal that it is being proposed specifically to address the rising decline in bus drivers and routes. And I would like that it would be clarified why the policy is being presented, or the proposal to change the policy is being presented, and what void is it actually being filled, because the policy language is quite broad, which it should be, so it does not actually specifically address specific roles. It's just addressing the criteria for the role. I mean, that is one of the questions that I have. Secondarily, what is the actual language of the policy proposal going to be? Because as it currently stands, it appears to be very vague. I was not able to decipher what it said. I also found some discrepancies in the language based upon what the current policy states and what was proposed. For instance, there are several nonviolent felonies that are drug charges. Currently, as the language stands, if we just change it to nonviolent felon, that conflicts with what is currently in the policy of no drug offenders. So I would like for that language to be clarified and those discrepancies to be resolved. Third, it's understandable that the policy language should be broad. We don't want to actually impose practice in policy, but I would also like some clarification on the practice of how this policy will be implemented. Will there be waiting periods, additional follow-up, additional criteria as it relates to the change in that policy? By no means am I stating that every person who falls in the category of a nonviolent felon should be unable to serve within the school system. If you haven't yet seen Ava DuVernay's documentary 13th, I urge you to watch it to understand why I am not saying that. I would never want to stand in the way of giving someone a chance to rebuild their life or an opportunity to provide for their family, but as a parent whose child was in the building on the floor of Fern Creek during the shooting, my children's safety is of utmost concern, and I would ask that it be yours as well. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for being here tonight. We will now move on to the consent calendar, and to my knowledge, there's one item to be pulled down, and that's item X, the revision of the board policy. Although it's a first reading for the magnet education, Mr. Duncan has asked that we pull item X down. Is there anything else to be pulled? I'm sorry.
Which one is that? The bus driver attendance. That's V.
I'm sorry, item V, Dr. Wilner has asked that we pull down the approval of attendance bonus palette for bus drivers and special needs transportation assistance. Anything else? Is there a motion to approve the consent calendar minus those 2 items, and then we'll come back and approve those 2 specific items? Ms. Duncan, second. Dr. Wilner, all those in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. So now for discussion, Dr. Wilner on first item V, the bus driver bonus palette.
Right. And I requested to pull this down from consent, not because I'm opposed to it, but because I would really just like to hear from HR about what we're doing. You know, I have this enormous sense of urgency about our bus driver situation, and I just wanted to have an opportunity to hear from you guys on this.
Okay, and I'd also ask Dr. Razor to jump in here too. It's a kind of a shared responsibility. So, and Mike has some good points about it. Essentially, we have an 8-point plan to solve the problem of not having enough bus drivers, and I'll tick those off for you, and then you can come back and if you. One is we want to beef up our operation in terms of the application center, in terms of putting more help in there to do more
Excuse me, could you speak directly into the microphone? They're not able to hear you in the back of the room.
How's that? Is that any
It's
better?
much better for the back of the room.
This
Thank you.
microphone, somebody dropped it, maybe it's... So beefing up the talent in the application center to be more proactive in terms of the call out that we have to get people in. We're putting an additional individual into each of the 13 compounds. These will be temps, by the way, until we've resolved the broader issue. And then 2 into the application center, 13 people into the compounds, 1 each, by the way, and then 1 for the HR function. So that's number 1. Number 2, we have driver candidates now, and at the present they go through the program. They're not paid while they go through the program, and so it's an investment of their time and energy to get there. And then if they're not successful, then that's 2 weeks of time or so. Mike, please correct me if that's wrong on the amount of time, but that's about right for on average. So what we've agreed to do is we're going to pay those people while they're in training, so that'll get them through the program at the sub-bus rate, which is $16.58 an hour. And there's going to be an effort on Mike's part to coach them through to make sure that when they get to take the tests and get through there, they have a higher probability of being successful. Number 3, we've agreed that we have a handful of teachers who drive buses for us for a variety of reasons, and those teachers will get paid their hourly rate to do just that. Number 4 is a hiring bonus, so that when somebody does get their CDL, they'll get $75 as a reward for getting through that. And then when they've served their 91st day as an employee of the district, then they'll get a $150 hiring bonus to get them on board. And then the absentee bonus would be for, we're going to try this as a pilot program. This will run until January 13th. And the goal here is to, if somebody has perfect attendance and no excuses here, by perfect we mean perfect every day for the hours they're supposed to be at work. If for each of those 10 days they have perfect attendance, so there'd be a $200 bonus that they would take home. That's anybody with a perfect attendance in the driver corps and the SNITAs. And there's the mechanics of when we can make this effective in terms of getting it into Munis and the time and attendance policy so that works effectively, because part of the challenge here is to keep track of this so that we don't lose control of it. Number 6, I guess, is to hire some monitors and to make it more palatable to drive a bus if you're on a troubled bus. We know that escrow is a problem. People receive a check and then expect to get X, and they get X minus 40% or whatever that number is, because we have to spread the checks out over 26 checks instead of, and this year it'll be 27. So that's a problem for some. And then Allison's going to do some good work and beef up what we're doing on the website in terms of hiring some banners and things on the website. And then at the root cause of this, because this is going to be a long-term issue, this isn't just something that's coming up as the economy continues to pick up. This is a challenge. So Mike and both working to look at different alternatives to change bell times. That'll take some study. There are a number of, we can reduce it, and correct me if I'm wrong, but somewhere between 80 and 100 routes if we were to get aggressive about how we change bell times to make most efficient use of the fleet that we have and the problem that we have.
So this is like a really basic question. Are we paying people enough to drive our buses? Are we paying starting bus drivers enough to be able?
There's a debate, an internal debate, and my belief is the answer is yes. You can start as a bus driver and make $16.58. If you choose to take a challenging route, it's an additional $2. That's $18.58. If you go across the river to Greater Clark County, they just negotiated a contract where they're paying their first-year drivers $15 an hour. And then the contract they negotiated was in their second year they'd moved to $17 an hour, and their third year moved to 20. So I believe the rate is right. It's not a simple money will solve it, in my opinion, and that's why we put in the pilot program, is to try and resolve that, because escrow issues, behavior issues, all of these things, it's a complex systemic problem that we're trying to unravel and figure out the right thing to do.
Thank you for addressing all that. One other question that I have related to the bus routes, and I know that when there are not enough drivers to get all of the routes covered, that routes have been dropped, and I've been aware and really troubled that the routes that have been first to be dropped have been at some of our alternative schools, at our TAP schools, at some of our state schools where we have students who are the most vulnerable, the most at risk of dropping out. These are really dropout prevention kinds of schools. And so I'm just curious to understand how those decisions are being made, and are we looking at the numbers, like how do we keep the fewest kids, or are we looking at these issues of the most vulnerable kids, apart from the numbers?
Dr. Razor, would you address that? Because I met with you and your transportation staff after you addressed that. Ms. Horn has some questions or comments that she would like to make also, but I'd like for you to address that. And also, before you start talking, I would like to commend you and the transportation staff for the work that you do, taking the time to meet with me, because I was the school board member that had elementary students left on the corner, which is unacceptable, and we agreed unanimously, not anyone's fault, except we don't have a driver. So I asked Dr. Razor to meet with me. He brought his team in. We spent time talking about it. I got good information, so thank you for that. Before you answer the question, also thank you to your team that was at 32nd and Dumanil last week. So thank you for the work that you do. I know you always feel like that we are always being on the negative side of the street, but when you do good work, hard work, it's my responsibility to thank you for what you do. So if you would speak to the issue that was just raised, and then Ms. Horn has some comments.
Yes, ma'am. And am I on? Yes, and thank you very much. I can't say enough about my team and what they're doing, and a lot of it goes on under the radar. I don't want to take too much of your time, but I want to give everybody a little bit of background so we all know what we're talking about on the same page. Currently, right now, we have 893 middle and high school routes. Then we have 873 elementary routes and approximately 300 early childhood routes. And those run in succession. In the worst of attendance times, we trend around a 10% absenteeism, which means right now we need one of two things. We need 800 bus routes or less at any given time, or 1,000 bus drivers. The 800 bus routes would allow us to cover the 10% absenteeism with the number of bus drivers we have today, which is around 890, or the 1,000 bus drivers would allow us to cover the routes that we have today with the absenteeism when it hits its peak. And those numbers trend pretty consistently and are trending the same this year as well. So when we say that we've dropped a route, everyone also needs to understand too, that means that everybody who can conceivably drive a bus is driving one. And that's part of the reason for the relief that we're getting for our compound staff. Because most, if not all of our compound staff are former bus drivers, many of whom still have an active CDL and active driver certification. So those people are peeled off. So in the mornings when a route is dropped, it means there is no one left to drive a school bus. And we also commend the teachers, the coaches, the security guards who have volunteered to drive a bus for us in the morning before school, or in the afternoon. We have elementary teachers who do a morning route for us, and then we have some high school people who do afternoon routes for us because their schedules work. So having said all that, there's no good, justifiable answer that I can give you about how you select the routes you're going to drop, because you're then at that point making a decision that you don't want to make. There's no right answer for that, and I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time trying to justify. So the other thing that I want to say about that decision is that's a decision that's being made, and many times at 5:45, 6 a.m., as all of a sudden somebody calls in last minute, my kid's sick and I can't come to work, and you're left sort of in a lurch. So what we try to do in those instances is we try to impact the least amount of students. And that's really the best answer I can give you. We do have with our alternative schools, because sometimes attendance can be an issue and tardiness can be an issue, those schools have TARC protocols in place. And again, that doesn't fall back as our reasoning for that, but that is that's just sort of a look into the decisions are made. Something that I do want to mention, because Mr. Hudson alluded to it, during the summer, I sat in front of you and sort of previewed sort of where we were at, and we talked about a third bell time for the two discipline alternative schools as well as the TAP program. We've ran the numbers and ran them again this morning. We would not have dropped a single route this year if we had shifted to that bell time. Now, I'm not saying into the future, if attendance spikes, everything that we're doing, we need to do and probably more. And then definitely, it's not going to be the last time you hear me say this, and probably Mr. Hudson as well along with me, we need to make some really preventative changes for next school year so we can insulate ourselves from this, because like I said, we can trend bus driver attendance and employee attendance overall. I know from my time in human resources, to where we can predict what these days are going to look like, sometimes to the day that we're going to have high absenteeism. So we do need to reduce the number of routes we have going at any one time, and that does also create a cost savings, because it also means that you need less buses in your fleet and less drivers overall.
Ms. Horn?
I guess I'll direct this to Dr. Hargens. When we're faced with a decision of different bell times, and we've heard this since, the spring from HR, that there would be a shortage in bus drivers, from Dr. Razor's department, this operational and managerial leadership, why are we in this position now? What do you propose? Is there anything we can do? I am hearing from the TAP school. These are pregnant teenagers and their children, and they don't have transportation. They're our most vulnerable. It's a award-winning, nationally recognized dropout prevention program, and this is unacceptable to me.
And it's unacceptable to me as well. So Dr. Razor and his team, and they outlined a collaborative 8-point plan that we have worked to make sure that we don't leave any child without transportation. So I think Dr. Razor has said, and every time Dr. Razor texts me, I said, what else can we try? And we keep trying everything. So we'll continue to explore everything. And Mr. Hudson talked about the 8-point plan. I guess it now has 8 points. It started with 4. I'm directly involved in monitoring the plan with them to make sure that we do all the plans and we adjust accordingly. So it is not by any stretch a lack of effort or a lack of really great thinking by the transportation team.
Mr. Hadaway.
Yeah, I have a quick question. Hearing from some constituents, when a bus route has dropped, and how are we communicating to those parents so that their students that are sitting on the sitting on the side, waiting for their bus, that their parents know to come get them or whatever? What communication channels we have if that happens?
We are notifying the schools as soon as possible. Our guidance to them, and again, sometimes it's a rolling notification.
Sure.
Because it's our goal, and it's what happened, and we explained with Miss Porter. It's our goal every day to cover every one of our routes. And what happened with the Foster route that morning was we simply ran out of time, and they looked up, and it was 10 minutes after the bus should have already been on its way, and they hadn't gotten it covered yet. So what we're communicating to schools is, as soon as we realize that that route's not going to be covered, we communicate to them, say it's going to be bus this, and then the school will start communicating with those families as soon as possible. Sadly, we're getting better at being able to tell when we're not going to get them covered unless we have a last minute no call, no show, and our notification is getting a little better, but it's not, like I said, all at once we realize here's the 5 routes we're not covering today. It's, oh, that one's not going to work. And then 5 minutes later, that one isn't, and that's happening at 13 separate bus compounds. The question's been asked to us too. I'm going to ask what a potential follow-up question would be is, can you go back and get those kids later? From the middle high school routes, we're short, because you heard me say we have 893 routes at the middle high level, then only 873 at the elementary. So the conventional wisdom would be that means there's 20 routes out there and 20 buses out there. Those people aren't at work because they don't exist, because we're covering those routes already. So on the middle high, we don't really have the opportunity to circle back. The way that we're preventing dropping elementary routes into the future, it was a contingency we didn't think we were going to have to worry about. But the way we're preventing that is, if it looks apparent that we potentially might not have enough people to cover elementary routes, we're, with a lot of foresight, because we have a little more time there to make that call, we will call XYZ Elementary and say, we're going to start notifying your families, you start notifying your families, bus 1237 is going to be running 35 minutes late this morning, or there's going to be another bus that's coming through 45 minutes later to get those children. We're working with schools, and it doesn't always work out because the person who drives their activity bus may or may not be there, but on a case-by-case basis, as Dr. Hargan said, we're turning over every stone. So if there is somebody at that school who hasn't volunteered to be a bus driver but drives the team to the games on Friday nights, is willing to go cover that route, we're doing that as well.
Mr. Brady, and then we're going to call for the vote on this one, please.
A few questions. First of all, what is our legal responsibility for transporting students?
Frank, do you want to speak to that?
The statute says that a school district shall provide transportation for students who live a certain distance from school.
Okay, so it's a shall. Okay. So that's something to take into consideration here. I know that you've been speaking to this issue for a while. Obviously, we'd love to go back in time, excuse me, to address this issue, but we can't. So I'm curious as to why it took so long for us to kind of get to this point. I know you had been suggesting this back in the summer, and I don't know why we didn't have an alternative bell schedule, but I guess we'll wait for that answer at a different time. Some of the other concerns I'm having is that I understand that we have alternative school buses that carry alternative school students, ideally alternative school students, directly to those schools. My understanding is that these alternative school students are now riding buses with general, just with non-alternative school students, and that's something that we ideally want to prevent. Is that correct?
Typically, we run direct run buses on our alternative schools. So Minor Daniels Academy and Breckenridge Metro, we typically in the past have ran direct run buses. In order to ensure those students getting to school, some of our Minor Daniels buses and some of our Breckenridge Metro buses are running through the depots on the way in the morning to assure that those students are able to get to school.
And I know that those buses are ideally, because this board approved it, to have bus monitors on there. Are we having a shortage of bus monitors as well?
We are attempting to put a bus monitor on every bus that schools are asking for, including, again, teachers as well. So any school that is requesting a bus monitor that has someone to cover it, yes. Having said that, there are some buses where people probably haven't volunteered to be a bus monitor.
Okay. So there's that issue. And regarding, I guess from an HR perspective, we had talked about the other salary levels or pay levels for school bus drivers in other surrounding districts.
Yes.
My concern is that that might not be our target audience. And the reason I say this is because we are in Louisville, Kentucky. We're very distribution heavy, and there's a lot of competition for a lot of CDL drivers out here. Are we really looking at the correct market to be able to attract drivers that can actually operate our school buses just by looking at the, the other school districts? And I'm concerned about, folks like, the freight services or UPS or, I guess even TARC services or whatnot. I mean, I'm not really sure if we're looking at, just by looking at other school districts around here, and especially with the holidays coming up, are we really going to be competitive to trying to attract drivers to be able to fill this critical need?
I guess there are a couple of answers, and I don't have a good answer for you. Let me just say that. I mean, and that's part of the speculation.
Before you give that answer, there's some more information that Dr. Razor has, but in the interest of time, if you all could put something together that would come to us in the Friday update, go on and answer the question now. But when I met with you, you talked about TARC, you talked about UPS, you talked about a number of things that have been done. So rather than to do a full-blown report on bus transportation at this time, if you would answer Mr. Brady's questions, I would appreciate it, and then we will call for the vote and move to the next item. So if you would answer Mr. Brady's questions, please.
I'll turn it over to Mike to give you the TARC data that he reviewed with you, so it's the same for everybody.
Are you referring to TARC and their drivers, or right now TARC?
I'm referring to more than just TARC, like UPS and the entire market.
Yeah, well, TARC is right now offering unlimited overtime to their drivers. So it is very attractive to be a TARC driver, even though you start at a lower rate than we pay. But again, with TARC, there is no escrow. So you're getting that full amount right off the bat. UPS right now is actually, when we proposed the $100 a week bonus, we modeled that off UPS. By the time we 5 days later had a meeting finally that we could all get together on, and that's not a very long amount of time, so I'm not saying it was 5 days. It had bumped up to 200. So now, again, working for UPS, you're working 10 to 20 hours a week, making $10 an hour, but you're roughly doubling your salary, again, no escrow. So that is going on there. We have also worked, I wasn't sure where Ms. Porter was going with this. We've met twice now with TARC looking for alternatives around ways of getting kids to school. Because I was just in Cincinnati a few weeks ago. They use their public transportation system quite heavily for a lot of their schools. Boston uses their public transportation system quite heavily for a number of their schools. I know Philadelphia, Chair Jones actually was in Philadelphia several weeks ago and sent an email saying, I'm noticing lots of kids getting on and off. The TARC system, I'm glad we're working with them, and we're working in concert with them on our master plans. Even, as I told you, from the facility side, I've got people from Metro government working on the district facilities plan. They've got me helping to work on the comprehensive city plan. But what TARC shared with me is the TARC lines haven't changed since, I believe, 1955 when the trolleys went away. So we have, I think, 40 routes that TARC follows that doesn't get kids necessarily where we need them to use them as a transportation alternative for say, secondary schools or some of our voluntary and mandatory alternative programs.
Okay.
The one other thing that I would like to add quickly is the decisions that we're making about financial rates and those sorts of things if this is a shorter term thing, we don't want to be going in and changing the salary structure that has a long-term effect. So if you were, there was a proposal that we beat around in our thinking here that would take us to $23 an hour to do that. It's a $4 million hit to the budget. So it's something that we want to be careful and thoughtful about how we put in place. And not only does this have an impact on just what would go on with our bus drivers, but all the other unions as well. And we have a stepping stone arguments to be made. So it's a complex problem. And the other thing I would say is it's not just here, it's a nationwide issue that everybody's having. So
the other thing, and I know we didn't want this to be the one thing I would say, and I think the reason Mr. Hudson is saying that too, if we want to look at long-term financial impact, and I don't think anyone here would disagree with me, there's a solution around this to keep this from happening, but it's going to take some forethought. It's not something we can do for Wednesday morning tomorrow. And there may be some things we could do to start the second semester perhaps that would limit this, but long term we can fix this problem.
And you're referring to changing bell times.
Yeah, I'm referring to changing bell times, and as well as, for example, and I know lots of information, but I want you to realize that we're working this problem every day. Right now, we take kids to 56 different sites for early childhood. We could fit all of those kids in 12 early childhood centers and probably cut 200 buses out of the fleet. And do it with more, provide early childhood with more efficacy than we currently do with onesie-twosies all over the place. It's some of those kind of thinking, and that doesn't affect our student assignment plan at all, and makes more room in a lot of elementary schools that could actually help with some of the diversity guidelines that we've been talking about.
Okay.
Let me thank you, Dr. Razor. In the meeting that I had there, they have done a tremendous amount of work about changing the bell schedule. They mentioned doing that in January. We're not ready to do that in January because that's something that has to be communicated to our principals, to our students, to our staff. And when we first talked about moving the bell schedule, are changing the bell schedule, I know at least 2 of my colleagues said people are calling saying don't do that. So when I met with Dr. Razor, I said let's do the process in a manner so that everyone understands and that we communicate it out. So there is lots of work that has been done that we will continue to hear about. So in the process, Dr. Wilner, of saying you wanted to call this down to say what a great idea it was, we've been able to answer lots of questions along the way, so thank you for that. So would you please make the motion for us to receive item B, please? You seconded? Did you make the motion?
So yes.
Okay, is there a second? Ms. Horn, all those in favor? Motion passes. Thank you very much. And then we have one other item that has been pulled down, and that's item X, which is a first reading, but Board Member Duncan wanted us to pull down the item about magnet education. So if you would briefly tell us your concerns about this, and then we will vote this and move on, please.
Yes, it is a first reading. I understand that, and while I appreciate all of the work that's been done in ironing out the parts that are very good, most of it is fine. I cannot support that ability of a school to exit its kids, exit students. It's inconsistent with Magnet Schools of America, and when we use that as our reference, I think it'd be nice to be able to use it all the way through as a reference. So at this point, I can't support that. Okay. So I want a separate vote on that.
Okay, so this is the first reading of this. This is not anything for final approval, but Ms. Duncan wanted to be clear that she did not support even the first reading of this. So is there a motion to receive item X, the magnet education first reading? Mr. Hadaway, second? Second the motion. Anyone going to second the motion? I'll second. All those in favor of moving X forward? All those opposed? All those abstaining? So those in favor were Mr. Hadaway, Ms. Horn, Porter, Dr. Wilner. Those opposed were Ms. Duncan, and those abstaining were Board Member Brady. Okay, we have now taken care of the consent calendar in its entirety. Thank you very much. Moving on to tie bids. Mr. Hathaway, would you do the tie bids tonight, please?
Item number 8 on bid ID 7305 for tires, tubes, recapping, and repair. And the item is awarded to Kohler Tire and Supply, Inc. Kohler.
Vote to approve that.
We have to approve the tie bid. Is there a motion to approve? Mr. Hathaway, second. Ms. Horn. All those in favor? Motion carries. Thank you very much. So now we've done the tie bids. We're moving down to the board planning calendar and then board reports. And there are 3 people to speak on non-agenda items. Before we do the planning calendar, I want to remind us that we do have an executive session scheduled for this evening. So having said that, the board planning calendar, one of the items that we want to talk about is the perspective of changing of how the agendas will look for our board meetings, with 1 meeting a month being strictly business, which is the format that we're following tonight. The second meeting of the month would be work sessions, which is more information-based versus business, but there would always be a spot available for any business item that we need to vote. Prior to tonight, board members received information in the Friday update, or I believe it came in the Friday update, asking our thoughts about that. So I've asked Dr. Hargins to summarize the thoughts. After summarizing the thoughts, Dr. Wilner would like to hear from each board member what your thoughts are, and then we will move on with other items for the board planning calendar. So, Dr. Hargins.
Thank you. Actually, what the discussion is to have 2 board meetings a month, so the same number of meetings overall, but 1 meeting focusing on work sessions information item. So no action, but reserving a spot if there was a time-sensitive action that you needed to take. The other meeting would be like the meeting we're experiencing right now, which would be straight business meeting without the work session information items. So 2 meetings a month, so the same amount of time, but spent differently. The start time, the feedback was that probably needs to be determined. Maybe it wouldn't need to start at the same time. One of the suggestions was to make sure that when you do the planning work session that is not time sensitive, that doesn't have approvals, that there be a hard stop time, that have a hard start and a hard stop time, just to be respectful of everybody's time. So again, and 2 school systems that do it, Fayette Schools here in Kentucky does it, and Austin does actually 3 board meetings a month, but 2 board meetings like what we talked about, Austin, Texas. So that's the general concept.
Okay, thoughts about the concept that we're considering of changing the format for meetings, starting with Ms. Duncan, and then we'll just come down the table. If you don't have a comment, that's a great news. But if you do, this is your opportunity to share it, and then we will move on with the planning calendar. Again, reminding you that we do have an executive session. Ms. Duncan.
I think that this is a meeting, this is an item that should be decided by the next board. I mean, we're getting ready to have elections, and I feel like we might have new people on, and I think they should have some input into this meeting format. So, yeah, I think we ought to wait until we have a new board to decide this.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Wilner.
Thank you. I had said that I appreciated the opportunity to send in comments about the change in format, but I also said that I don't do my best thinking in a vacuum, that I really benefit from hearing from my colleagues and having discussion all together. So it's enormously helpful to me if we're able to have those conversations. especially when we're talking about changing the meeting format from the way it's been for a long time. And so, and I know we could change it again. We're not necessarily stuck with one new way of doing things, but I was just interested in being able to have conversation with board colleagues. The other thing that I want to say, and I'm one of the folks who was really in favor of reducing our number of business meetings. I'm still in favor of that. But one of the reasons for that is to have more opportunity to hear from the community, to hear from community members. And so I just want to be sure that because you can't sign up to speak at a work session, that in some of those non-business meetings that we're maybe having community forums or some kind of, Allison and I had spoken at one point about sort of a town hall where the different departments are set up around the room and board members are here. So I want to just make sure that we're not closing off opportunities to hear directly from constituents.
Mr. Brady?
Thank you. I think that overall, looking at having a business meeting versus a discussion meeting, if you will, is a fine thing to consider. And like Member Wilner, Dr. Wilner, I think it's something that I like the fact that we have a deliberative process. I think that's fundamental to our system of government, and I certainly can't think of all the different angles. And very often during the course of a question that's being asked by one of my colleagues here, that will spur a question within my mind, say, oh, that's an interesting point. I didn't consider that particular point of view. And I think that's something that makes us a stronger board because we all each bring a unique type of skill set to this board meeting, this board position. So I very much want to have more organic conversations. And that means more of a back and forth, not just the opportunity to say my piece and then that's it, and I've had my time. So during those types of discussions, I think, those types of meetings, I think that will be perfectly fine. And business meetings kind of being kind of dry and, not very much to it, hopefully. The other concern I'm having, if we're going to have a hard stop for work session meetings, which I totally understand that, but we also need to provide that we have an adequate amount of time for board members to actually ask questions or have a discussion during those work sessions. For example, we didn't really have that today. We had an hour and a half worth of talking about our assessment, our testing results that have come back, and we went right up, actually a little over our time that was allowed. There was really no time for each of the board members to really have a work session discussion, and that's part of the reason we have work sessions, to really talk about and discuss and distill the information that we received. I mean, there are 7 of us, and even if you were to give us the last 15 minutes of a 1-hour work session, that still means that each of us only get 2 minutes. So I think that we need to really look at very hard about time allocation and limiting the presentation time so we can have more of a Q&A and a back and forth, not only with each other, but also with the administration as well.
Mr. Hadley.
This won't affect me, but I've had this discussion and tried to put this forward for a couple of years for sure. So I'm glad that it is finally being discussed. I think I can echo a bunch of what everybody said over there, including Board Member Duncan. I agree. I think it's a decision for the next board, and I also do think that anytime you can facilitate discussion, it is helpful. It does make us a better board, and you gave a great picture of how that does that. Someone will spark a question, and then you think of it in a different perspective. So I think we've been at our best when we've had time to discuss. It's a good call out about adding in question and answers. Those of you that know that are here at the work sessions, that's a lot of time when I speak because it's a really good time to get some give and take back and get some answers. So I support it. I think it's a great move. And I would just add one other thing that I've always brought to the table to the board chairs that I've served under. And it's nothing new, Dr. Hart, you know this, but anytime that you can get the materials earlier to the board members to review, and I think this setup would help with that. It helps a board member be better prepared for the discussion and any vote.
Ms. Horn.
I really think that having one board meeting where it's a business meeting, I think we can do this. And then if it ends up that we need to have other things happen within that time frame and in our planning meeting, which would be the other meeting, then that would be available, that could be announced. Lexington, Kentucky, Fayette County has a meeting at 6 p.m. for their business meeting, and that seems really rational to me. And then they have their planning meeting at 5:30. And I think that it's aptly called a planning meeting because that's really what it is. I think they look at it as planning for the business meeting and also learning. I personally would be an advocate of flipping the classroom. And so I think that I would love to watch our folks give us their presentation via a video or a PowerPoint if they wanted to be detailed with it, voiceover, whatever it was, but to flip the classroom so that we spend our time together actually discussing among the board, kind of determining, deciding, and planning things instead of just death by PowerPoint, so that's, kind of something. But that timing issue is important to me. I think there could potentially be more people that are working outside the home in next year, and so being a full-time working outside the home, I think that these two work in the classrooms, you work in the schools too. So I am absolutely aware that you are everywhere, Diane and Linda. But I think getting to a meeting at 4 o'clock is extremely difficult for me. And so I could see that 5:30 would work out much better. But in the end, I think it would be wise to let the next board, set this and have this same discussion. I think there's some wisdom here. And hopefully, we can set maybe the first quarter in place and try it, and then we could see, with the new board. So I'd be for going ahead and trying it, throwing it against the wall, seeing how it works. It's a big fail, but we're willing to fail too, and so, yeah. That's it.
Thank you. Basically, this is conversation to get more feedback as we move forward. If you look at the planning calendar, we have not flipped the format for 2017 at this time. Ms. Duncan, it was a great call out to say, let's wait and see what we look like in 2017, so folks have an opportunity to voice their opinion, so thank you for that. Now, as it pertains to the current planning calendar, are there items that need to be added to the planning calendar as quickly as we possibly can, please? Ms. Duncan.
2 things. Restorative practice plan, because I don't think we've ever heard the plan for how we're doing restorative practices, and I know we've got money devoted to that too. And recommendation on metal detectors, and that's probably going to come from Dr. Harkins, whether yes or no, based on whatever you all find out. But we would wait for a recommendation on metal detectors somewhere at some point, have that discussion.
Thank you. Dr. Wilner, do you have anything?
Make it really quick, just as a follow-up from the 5:30 work session today, coming back with the policy on sex ed guidelines.
Mr. Brady?
Nothing at this time.
Okay, Mr. Hathaway. Ms. Horn?
I'm really interested in pursuing something that finance and John's area have been working on, showing minority women, disabled veteran business owners how JCPS is doing. And I know there is some absolute opportunities here for exciting things for our community if we, kind of get this right. And I know there's some real will here to do it within our leadership at JCPS. So I'm really interested in seeing a policy come forth to the board, but we've got to have these minds get it right. you know, so I'm interested in having them go to work on that and maybe reporting on that, maybe first informational, you know, on what the issues are, and then really seeing something done.
Motion to receive the planning calendar. Ms. Duncan, seconded by Mr. Brady. All those in favor? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Moving on to the board reports. Board reports. Mr. Brady, Ms. Duncan.
I just want to say thank you, Vice Chair Porter, especially for filling in today. I know that probably was a last-minute thing. Also want to report out that I had the opportunity, as Vice Chair Porter and myself both attended the meeting, and also Dr. Razor from the district attended the meeting regarding metal detectors that was held in West Louisville at the YMCA off Chestnut, and that was an interesting discussion. There's my understanding, and I'm sure maybe Vice Chair Porter might have some more information about this, but my understanding is that there's going to be further discussions that are going to be scheduled, and one of which is going to have, I think, more of a student voice aspect to it. There were 2 students at this particular event, and they both spoke very eloquently and very articulately about their particular viewpoints, and I thought that was really, really nice to hear as a board member, to see that and hear that student voice. In addition to that, I will also want to invite everyone out to the community conversation I'm going to have on this coming Thursday at 6:30 at Farmer Elementary, which is off of Billtown Road into Gene Snyder. So it's a community conversation. You're all more than welcome. We'd love to have you come out and have some good conversation. I believe Dr. Hargins will be there, possibly some of the administrative staff, and you'll also get to see a really great District 7 school. So just want to go ahead and put that invitation out there and hope to see you there. Thank you.
Mr. Hadaway.
All I have to do is invite everybody. I'm looking forward to coming to Panther Country next month, PRP, Pleasure Ridge Park, and right next door to it, literally right next door, is Greenwood Elementary, and the timeline for their media center to be completed and dedicated is November 15th, the date of our board. So I'm looking forward to another tour through there, and exciting things happening there on Greenwood Road. So just invite everybody out to Pleasure Ridge Park High School, November 15th.
Thank you. And Dr. Wilner filed her report. It's online. Ms. Duncan, do you have something?
I will be in Frankfort tomorrow for a local school board member advisory council meeting with Commissioner Pruitt from 11 to 1. And I would encourage everybody, if you have not been to a school that has compassionate, or there is a compassionate school designee, please visit. It's an amazing class. I know I got to see at Blake Elementary, so I would encourage everybody to do that.
Ms. Horn, I'm sorry.
I had 2 community conversations this fall. One was at the fair, Middletown Fair, and the other was at Eastern High School. We had a great turnout, a lot of participation and engagement with students, and also with the schools, the different music groups and jump roping. It was really exciting. I've also been taking some visits to PTA meetings in the district. I've visited Lowe and Norton, KMS, Camera, Crosby, and it's just really amazing in my district to see the work that our parents, the time and effort that they spend trying to really make a quality environment for their children. 30 plus people at a PTA meeting, amazing. They're holding them a lot of times after school, basically after work. So they're getting parents. There's a huge effort to engage men, which is really exciting, and they're having a really good effect. So, and they're trying to engage them really in new ways, different ways. It's really kind of exciting, I think. I really got a lot out of the training that we did on equity when we went to the Urban League. I felt like I was among friends. I really felt, I heard them, and I felt like we could really build something with that partnership. So I was really, it was changed. I was changed after my visit. So I was really thankful for that visit. So I really appreciated that training that I received.
Quickly, board reports, I'll echo what Ms. Horn said, that a majority of us were able to attend the Equity and Excellence opportunity that was offered by the Louisville Urban League, JCPS, and 55,000 Degrees, and it was combined boards of the Louisville Urban League, JCPS, 55,000 Degrees, and 15,000 Degrees. So it was a great day, great presentation, great conversation. Board member Brady and I were at the YMCA to hear presentations about metal detectors, and there was a pro table, con table, and a neutral table. And there were two outstanding students there, one from Central High School and the other from PRP, that were very articulate, so it was good to hear them. I would have hoped that we would have had more community participants there, but I was told when I left that it would be held in two other parts of the county. One would be student-focused. I think after hearing the student voice, it's really important that we go in the schools and hear what the students are having to say, because to tack on to what you said, Ms. Duncan, there was mention of compassionate schools and the other things that we're doing in our schools to not even suggest metal detectors. So, but that came from students that were on at that particular gathering. Last night I had the opportunity to attend an event, and you remember last year we had this young man that graduated from the Brown School. His name was Blake Dawson, and we called him the $1 Million Man because he had so many scholarships. Well, the $1 Million Man was back in Louisville last night, and he was here recruiting for FAMU. That's where he's going to school right now, and there was a room full of folks, and it was an exciting day for students and parents. And after hearing what they offer at Florida A&M, I'm sorry I didn't get to go there, but I did tell them that my daughter was happened to be there at Bethune-Cookman. But the whole experience and what I heard last night for the students that graduate from their business program, they are hired when they graduate. They have opportunities to do things like with Lilly and all of the big companies all over the United States. So it was very uplifting to see him, first of all. And he said that when he went to FAMU, I'm just saying, you know, we always talking about expectations of students. There's a certain way they introduce themselves. You know, I am this program and blah, blah, blah. So it's not like I can walk up to you and say, hey, I'm the $1 Million Man, because that's not accepted on campus. And they currently wear suits 3 days a week. And the young ladies wear heels. So we are training people to be professionals, and you know, we should be thankful for that, because we're sending them great people and they give great scholarships. So I just want to give him a shout out. And also Friday, I was at the Louisville Defender, had their business luncheon, and I had an opportunity to hear a Doss graduate. I'm doing shout outs for graduates. Derek Anderson was the speaker. And if you don't know Derek Anderson's story, you need to know his story. I have his book. But there were no excuses in his life. And he was abandoned by his parents. But he did not use that as an excuse. So he has a wonderful story to tell. Doss should be proud. We should be proud that there's a young man that made it despite all the odds, despite being talked about or looked at as being homeless and those kinds of things. He was a father early in life. So my point is to give a shout out, because we are doing great things in JCPS, and we do have many students that are out there. I just gave you 2, but there are many more, and just wanted to give them a shout out for the good work that they're doing. That's longer than I should be allowed to talk, so somebody should say you can shut up now. So I'm going to shut up on board reports, and we're going to move on. There are 3 persons wishing to address the board on non-agenda items. And our first person that's here this evening is Mr. Bo Johnson. Mr. Johnson, if you would come forward, please. Thank you for being here tonight. Again, 3 minutes to address the board. Bell at the end of 2.5 minutes, and then 30 seconds to finish your statement, and then there will be a bell that will sound twice. Thank you so much for being here. Sorry you had to wait to this point, but thank you for being here. Mr. Johnson.
We're here this County School Nutrition Association is a local chapter of Kentucky School Nutrition Association, which is a state chapter of a School Nutrition Association and a national chapter. The association is a professional association. It is based on furthering education, certificates, and credentials. It is not a bargaining unit of any sort. JSENA has reached out to AFSCME to be recognized into our union. What I have here, what was just presented to you, is roughly 700 membership cards into AFSCME. That was signed on behalf of JCASP and JSCNA. A lot of acronyms there. They are the only service employees that are not attached to a union. Now it is time that they have representation during future contract negotiations, due process meetings, like all service employees in Jefferson County. I am now presenting you with those cards, so JCPS will now recognize JSCNA as official AFSCME members. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for being here tonight. Our next speaker is Carmen Lindsley. Carmen Lindsley, about video cameras in schools. Carmen, welcome. Thank you for being here tonight.
Hello, as a concerned citizen of the public, I come to you today to discuss some of the things that I learned about while I was working for a short time in Atkinson Elementary School. So the children trusted me, and
if you could move closer to the mic. Yes, ma'am.
Right here?
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am, so they can hear you in the back. Thank you.
All right, so as a concerned member of the public, I wanted to share with you my knowledge of the Atkinson Elementary School and what goes on there, since I was a teacher there for just a few weeks, and ask that you provide remotely operated video cameras for teacher accountability, because I've come to realize that the teachers prefer types of emotional abuse, such as screaming in the faces of children and hitting, instead of what they've been trained to do, the leader in me. So I'm now going to go and explain the things that students have said to me about what they've experienced, and some of the things that I've witnessed to support the idea that having video cameras in the hallways and in the classrooms would really help the teachers do their compliance and not be hurting the children. So my second day of work, I was told by two boys that I don't know which did which, but one of them was hitting a child in the back of the head, and the other was hitting.
Excuse me, I'm going to have to stop you, because as it pertains to personnel, if it sounds like you just called the names of two teachers, we cannot hear that. If it's a personnel issue, you are welcome to step out and speak with HR, but we are not allowed to do name calling like that if there are concerns. If it's a general, and maybe I misheard, but I thought I heard the name of two teachers being called. We cannot allow that to happen.
I went to Child Protective Services, and they told me to come to you with my concerns.
You can come to us with your concerns if you do not do specific name calling of staff. So if you want to complete your statement without name calling of staff, and after you finish, there will be someone from JCPS management that will be happy to meet with you in the back. But as a person, we have to think in terms of, and I'm not saying it's true or false, I'm just saying to protect the rights of everyone, we cannot have names to be called. And that's just the policy that we have. Am I wrong, Mr.
That's
Miller?
correct, Vice Chair Porter.
Okay, so if you want to finish without calling names, and
Yes.
then we will make someone available to speak with you.
Okay. Yes.
And I'm sorry to take up your time, so Angie's watching the clock, but it's just the way we do our business. Thank
Sure.
you.
Okay, so then another student was having a conversation with a unnamed teacher and said that he felt she was going to hit him when she took him into a room alone. And she said, what happens there has to happen. And then a behavior counselor threatened the child with hurting him and making him bleed. And then he explained that this was how his father acted towards him, and he thought it was an effective way to distract the child. And another teacher threatened to hit a child when the child was trying to get first aid and go to the nurse. And then threatened a child with denying food. Well, so those would be neglect issues. And another child tried to report falling down some stairs and wanted to get seen by a nurse, but the teacher thought it was all a lie and wouldn't help. I still have 30 seconds. So I think that knowing these things, it would be good to place a video camera in the school. And also a parent had confided in me that had both last year and this year, a teacher had been hitting her son and a substitute teacher had hit her daughter. So it seems like video cameras should be in the schools, as well as maybe group counseling for employees, and individual counseling could be offered to the employees so they could work through any of their past things. And finally, it's good to not fire people who care about children, and to encourage nurturing relationships between teachers and children, and the social and emotional competence of the child, which can be done through the leader in me. These are both protection against child maltreatment factors shown by the Child Welfare Information Gateway of 2013, Preventing Child Maltreatment and Promoting Wellbeing, a Network for Action 2013 resource guide, which I can share the website with you.
Okay, unfortunately, the time is over for your presentation. Yes. I would direct you to Tom in HR and Dr. John Marshall in Compliance and Investigation if you would like to speak with them before you leave this evening.
Yes,
Thank
and
you
I
for
do
coming
believe
before.
you care about vulnerable children, because I did hear Ms. Wilner and Ms. Horner talk about their concern for vulnerable children, and I feel that you also, Ms. Porter, care about children, since you were talking about the boy whose parents abandoned them. So I feel like these children really need their teachers to not abandon them in that emotional sense, like to really stand up for them and love them and nurture them. And so I'm hoping you'll all work with me and help them out.
Thank you for coming to us tonight. I appreciate it. And I am the board member for Atkinson Elementary. I will follow up with both of these gentlemen. So thank you for being here tonight. And our third speaker is Daniel Walker. Daniel Walker wants to speak to us about bullying. Daniel Walker. Mr. Walker.
First of all, a lot of things you guys were saying, I haven't been able to hear them back. Learn how to speak in the mic. Okay, I represent a group that I started on Facebook called Grandparents Against School Bullying. Well, I have a granddaughter goes to Valley High. Boy, I've seen some statistics for these schools, and it's not good. Now, one of the instances was my granddaughter. My granddaughter got in school suspension too, and this kid has already been in trouble the same day for fixed. Now it's even broke more. Where's the justice? Ain't there. There's other instances it's happened to her. And it's happened to other students. Look at the girl that's been on the news. That started in school. She was ostracized in school. It carried out of school. I don't know how many have been here, have been behind some of these school buses, and see how these kids act. When I was a kid in school, I'm going to tell you something. Here's the way it worked when I was a kid in school. And I won't say how old I am. I'm older than dirt, but if you acted up on the you have the policy you do. Nobody can stick up for anybody. I wonder how many parents have heard from their children, well, so-and-so was picked on today.
Mr. Walker, thank you for being here. You have had your 3 minutes to speak to
I'm
the board.
serious. Okay, I'll
Thank
end
you
it. Bye.
for the opportunity. Thank you for being with us tonight. That completes our speakers addressing the board on non-agenda items. At this point, the board will go into an executive session with our general counsel, Frank Mellon, and the purpose of the executive executive session, except we have to come back to this room to adjourn the meeting. So there will be no report out, except we will come to this room to adjourn from our here tonight. Thank you.